In the depths of winter, an abandoned house held a chilling secret, and what rescuers found inside left them speechless. A starving mother lynx, barely alive, and 3 kittens, clinging to her, desperate for warmth. How did they end up there? And could they be saved in time? Without immediate help, they wouldn't survive another night. Most wildlife rescues happen in forests, but this was like something out of a horror movie. The mother lynx was too weak to move, but what happened next? No one expected it. If you've ever felt the weight of survival against impossible odds, you'll understand why this story is unforgettable. Snow swirled through the skeletal trees as the team of rescuers trudged toward the abandoned house. The structure loomed before them, half buried in drifts, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring into the frozen wilderness. Ethan, the lead rescuer, stepped onto the sagging porch, his boots crunching against ice-coated wood. He exchanged a wary glance with his partner, Mara, before pushing the door open. The hinges shrieked, shattering the eerie silence. A cold draft seeped from the darkness within, carrying with it a scent of decay and something else, something faint but unmistakable. Mara froze. "Did you hear that?" A sound, so soft it could have been mistaken for the wind, rose from the shadows. A weak, desperate cry. Ethan lifted his flashlight, its beams slicing through the gloom. The interior was a ruin, overturned furniture, rotting floorboards, graffiti scrawled across peeling walls. But near the crumbling fireplace, something stirred. The breath caught in Mara's throat. "Oh my God!" Lying against the cold stone hearth was a lynx, her skeletal frame barely rising and falling with each breath. Her once lush coat was matted, her ribs stark beneath the fur. And nestled against her shivering body, 3 tiny lynx kittens. They were barely moving, their frail bodies pressed close to their mothers for warmth. Their fur was thin, their cries weak. Ethan knelt beside them, his heart pounding. How did they survive out here? Mara swallowed hard. They won't last much longer. The urgency was clear. They had to act, now. The wind howled through the broken windows, rattling loose shutters as the rescuers worked quickly to assess the lynx. Ethan's gloved hand hovered over her frail body, noting the old scars along her legs, the healed-over wound near her shoulder. "She's been through something," Mara murmured, glancing around the ruined house. "But how did she end up here?" A flickering flashlight beam caught a rusted trap near the fireplace, its jagged teeth frozen open. Nearby, old pelts, long forgotten and dust-covered, hinted at the house's grim past. "This place belonged to a trapper," Ethan said grimly. "Maybe she was caught once, maybe she escaped." Mara frowned. Or was she someone's pet? Maybe stolen as a kitten? Her eyes traced the faint indentations in the dust where the lynx had curled up, as if she had once known this place, sought it out not just as shelter but as something familiar. The possibilities hung in the air. Was she a wild lynx forced into captivity, only to return when starvation drove her back? Or had she always been wild, struggling against the unrelenting winter, seeking refuge in the only place she could? Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the lynx let out a weak, rasping breath, her golden eyes flickering open for the briefest moment before sliding shut again. "Whatever her story," Ethan said, voice low, "if we don't get her out of here now, there won't be a second chance." Ethan pressed 2 fingers against the mother lynx's side, feeling the faint, erratic rise and fall of her ribs. Her breathing was shallow, her body dangerously cold. The kittens barely stirred, their tiny forms curled into her thin fur. Mara's voice was tight with urgency. "She's not going to make it if we wait." "And the kittens," she swallowed. "They're starving." The third rescuer, Daniel, hesitated. "If she's wild, handling her could send her into shock." "But if we wait too long," his sentence trailed off, the unspoken outcome heavy in the air. Ethan exhaled sharply, glancing at the fragile family before him. There was no time for hesitation. "We move now." "Carefully." Mara nodded, pulling a thick rescue blanket from her pack. She crouched beside the lynx, murmuring softly as she slowly draped it over the weak feline. The mother stirred, letting out a faint, rasping growl, but there was no strength behind it. Her golden eyes flickered open, unfocused. Ethan reached under her frail body, his movements steady and deliberate. "Easy, girl, we're getting you out of here." He lifted her gently, feeling the sharpness of her bones through his gloves. She tensed but didn't struggle. Meanwhile, Mara carefully gathered the kittens, their bodies light as feathers. One let out a feeble squeak before nestling deeper into her arms. The rescuers exchanged glances. No turning back now. "Let's go," Ethan said, stepping into the freezing night. The wind howled as the rescuers pushed forward, their boots crunching through knee-deep snow. The storm had worsened, turning the forest into a whiteout. Ethan gritted his teeth, tightening his hold on the mother lynx wrapped in the rescue blanket. Every second counted. Mara cradled the 3 kittens against her chest, shielding them from the bitter cold. She could feel their faint warmth, but something was wrong. One of them had stopped moving. "Ethan!" Her voice cut through the storm. "One of the kittens, it's not breathing right." Ethan's stomach clenched. "Give it to Daniel." Daniel, a vet in training, didn't hesitate. He pulled off a glove, his bare fingers trembling as he pressed them gently against the kitten's ribs. Barely any movement. "Too cold," he muttered, quickly unzipping his jacket and tucking the kitten inside against his own body heat. His hands worked fast, rubbing the tiny creature's chest in careful, rhythmic strokes. "Come on, little one, stay with us." For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then, a tiny, gasping breath. A weak, pitiful cry. Daniel exhaled in relief. "Still with us. But we need to move, now." Ethan nodded, his grip tightening around the mother lynx. "Keep them warm. No stops." The storm raged, but the rescuers pressed on, their burden fragile yet precious. The fight wasn't over yet. The moment they reached the wildlife center, the team rushed the lynx and her kittens into the warm, sterile room prepared for emergencies. The mother, her body now trembling with exhaustion, was immediately hooked up to N4 for emergency fluids and nutrients. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, locking with Ethan's, a fleeting moment of recognition before she closed them again, too weak to respond. Mara gently placed the kittens into an incubator, their tiny bodies shivering uncontrollably despite the warmth. Each breath they took was a struggle, their ribs rising and falling too quickly for such fragile lungs. The smallest of the 3, a tiny female with patchy fur, was the most concerning. "We need to work fast," Dr. Jensen, the head veterinarian, muttered as he took the kitten in his hands. "Echo's severely malnourished. Her lungs are underdeveloped. She won't survive if we don't act immediately." The staff moved quickly, setting up a tube feeding system to deliver much-needed nutrients directly into Echo's frail body. The kitten's tiny form barely registered the process, her eyes closed in exhaustion. It was a race against time. Each day, Echo's condition teetered between fragile stability and decline. The staff worked tirelessly, monitoring her vitals, administering fluids, and constantly weighing the risk of infection. Meanwhile, the mother lynx, though still weak, showed signs of improvement, her breathing deepened, her eyes grew brighter, but she remained distant, too weak to interact with her kittens. Doubts lingered in the air like the thick humidity of the recovery room. Could Echo's fragile body withstand the long road to recovery? Would the mother ever regain enough strength to care for her brood? With every passing hour, the question became more urgent. It had been weeks of constant vigilance, but the turning point came quietly. The mother lynx, once a fragile shell of her former self, now stood shakily on her own. Her legs trembled, but she held her weight, pushing herself up as if reclaiming what she had lost. Ethan watched from the doorway, a cautious optimism stirring in his chest. Slowly, the mother approached her kittens, who had been kept safely in their incubator. She nudged them gently with her nose, her instincts kicking in. Her rough tongue began grooming their tiny forms, the rhythmic motion a clear sign of her return to motherhood. Echo, the weakest, stirred at her mother's touch. Her little body, once frail and lifeless, was stronger now, each breath more stable than the last. Slowly, her eyes cracked open for the first time. The small, glassy pupils shifted, revealing striking blue irises, full of life and curiosity. A soft chuff escaped the mother's throat, her voice hoarse but filled with tenderness. It was a sound of recognition, of acceptance. Ethan felt a weight lift off his chest. The bond had been reestablished. Echo had made it. And the family, against all odds, was whole again. Months had passed, and the once fragile Lynx family had grown strong, their coats thick and healthy, their movements agile and confident. The Wildlife Center staff stood at the edge of the forest, their eyes filled with a mixture of pride and bittersweet emotion as they watched the family prepare to leave the safety of their enclosure. The mother lynx paused at the threshold of the forest, her golden eyes scanning the wilderness beyond. For a moment, she glanced back, her gaze lingering on the humans who had saved her family. It was a look of quiet recognition, a silent thank you before she stepped into the trees, her sleek body blending with the shadows of the forest. Echo, now vibrant and full of life, bounded after her siblings without hesitation, her steps sure and swift. She leaped over logs and bounded through the underbrush, no longer the fragile kitten that had once clung to life. She was a symbol of survival against all odds, a testament to the power of care, compassion, and resilience. As the family disappeared into the wilderness, Ethan and Mara exchanged a knowing glance. "This is why we do it," Ethan said quietly. "To protect them, to give them a chance." They stood together in silence, watching the wild reclaim its own. A new beginning had begun.